Okay, so it is 2:04. We got a number of people here, so we will kind of start with the beginning rigmarole, and we will go from there. So this is Silicon Dojo with Orderless Gatekeeper that's free to the end user hands-on technology education that tries to empower you to do whatever the hell it is that you want to do. So we do a lot of these classes, and we're going to simply have more and more and more and more. And yeah, you just kind of come, you show up, and you learn. Or you don't. There are no grades. You can come an hour late. You are allowed to come an hour late to these classes. You're not going to fail. Nor are you going to pass either. So anyways, if you do not know, I am in Asheville, North Carolina. And if you're like, that name sounds familiar. Yeah, we had a biblical disaster about a month ago. And yes, it is still a crap show here. It's still a crap show here. Our disaster is only just now really beginning. So if you notice me be spastic over about the next year, it's because trying to figure out what happens when your city self-destructs. It's gotta be great. Again, this is what I love. People say, Eli, don't worry about it. Don't worry about Asheville. Eli, New Orleans came back. Ergo, Asheville's gonna be fine. And you can do a Google search right now about whether or not New Orleans recovered from Katrina. And you'll see that it didn't. Now again, one of the most curious parts about this, I'll put this out there for all the airy-fairy folks out there, is that the people that are hurt the hardest were the African Americans. And it was something like 110,000 African Americans left New Orleans. Which apparently is a win. Anyways, leaving politics out of it. So anyways, we're dealing with Asheville. Again, as I will say with all this stuff, if you're a man out there, it is okay to cry. As long as you move that ball forward. As you're pushing that ball forward, you're pushing that ball down the football field, ball your eyes out. As long as you're moving the ball down the field. Again, donor box. We are free to the end user. That doesn't mean we're actually free. We do get supported by you folks, actually by crowdfunding. So there's a donor box link somewhere around. Click on that. Throw some money in. If you feel that these classes are worth money and you have money to give, click on donor box link. That would be ever so lovely. Again, I did have a great time in Raleigh at a conference called All Things Open. And I have to say, Raleigh is a great place. If you are in North Carolina, or if you're in whatever the surrounding area, you can get to Raleigh. I do have to say, Raleigh literally has the nicest tech community I have ever met in my life. I swear to Crikey, I swear to the spaghetti monster, the tech community in Raleigh is like the Pleasantville of Silicon. You go there, and you're like, but I don't understand. How are you all so nice? Because that's the thing, a lot of times you go to nice places that aren't actually doing anything. The reason that they're so nice is because they're not actually doing anything, so they don't have anything better to do. What's really kind of cool about Raleigh is they have a lot of stuff going on. They have the major corporations there, they have startups there, they have universities there, they have all kinds of things going on, and they are incredibly just lovely people. The All Things Open conference was great. Cost about $300 to go. They do it every year. They are having an All Things Open AI version in March that I'll probably go to too. Again, if you're in the area, I don't really see any downside to it. The one thing that I'll say, because All Things Open was an open source conference, as I was talking to people there, to the vendors, one of the things I learned about is open washing. Now they didn't call it open washing, but it is what it is. One of the things I've noticed, so be careful with this, with open source, and again, for my generation, I'm a Gen Xer, I remember when open source was still pure, right? When open source was about Linux, and open Office, and MySQL, and that kind of stuff. You know, it's the modern world. Everything has to be destroyed. Everything has to be destroyed. So one of the interesting things with open source now, is I was talking to vendors about their open source. And basically, what they open sourced was the worthless crap that didn't really mean anything. So with vendors, do be careful with open source vendors, where they essentially use like an open source FTP client so that you can put data into their proprietary servers and pull data out of their proprietary servers. They're like, we're open source. Like, wow, can I see your secret sauce? No. You can use our open source client and then pay us money to connect to our services. Like, Again, I'm not one of those, I don't get fiddly about definitions, but holy hell, that is actually something I'd be careful about. Don't kiss, oh, whoops, nope. There's not doing don'ts around here. We're doing positives. We're trying to be positive around here. That's what I learned from the people in Raleigh. Be positive. Anyways, kiss rich people butt. Again, that's one of the reasons I went to Raleigh. Asheville is a disaster. It is only going to get worse. Regardless of whether New Orleans has come back, it has been 2 decades. It's a long way down before we start going up again. So anyways, that's one of the reasons I was in Raleigh. It's one of the reasons I've done a few other things is I'm going out there. Basically to kiss rich people butt. Again, a lot of people out there like, Eli, I'm in tech. I don't want to kiss butt. It's like, well, it sucks to be you, because you do got to kiss butt. The one thing that I will tell you is it's better to kiss rich people butt than homeless butt. Here's the thing, when you kiss homeless butt, they might give you everything that they own. And it'll be a shopping cart. Doesn't really get you anywhere. Rich person will give you their table scraps. And their table scraps are big scraps. So anyways, again, that's one of the reasons I went to Raleigh. And again, one of those things to be thinking about. Again, look at me. I'm in Asheville. I'm in North Carolina. I'm in a place that had a biblical disaster. I'm in a place that had crappy economics before the biblical disaster. And so the thing is, again, that's all along with a lot of things. Like when people try to get ahead in life, right, they try to hyper-focus on here. How do I do this in Asheville? It's like, balls to that. I'm going to go over there, and I'm going to get their money, and I'm going to bring it back to Asheville. That sounds like a much better idea. But anyways, that's just me. Again, there are new meetups now. So with all of this, where the hell is anything? So we have our meetup. All right, crap. We have our meetup. So this is the online meetup. This is what you're a member of. You're watching this. We got 1,600 members. Asheville meetup, just so you know. So again, we are going back to in-person meetups. Because I do think that in-person thing actually has a lot of value. So we have the Silicon Dojo Asheville edition. If you do go and do a search for that on Meetup, we've got 256 members there, and I'm meeting with the people for the space on Monday, hopefully, and we should be having these classes in November. So in November, we're going to start having in-person classes here in Asheville, actual hands-on. I can help you out, you can meet, yay. And then again, like I say, I was so impressed with Raleigh. Our next thing, that's right, we are doing Research Triangle. So Research Triangle is kind of like this thing in the Raleigh area. Anyways, we're doing Silicon Dojo Research Triangle. My idea is to go there once a month, maybe every once in a month and a half, do like 3 days of classes, kind of specifically, right, target something. And again, by doing it there, you get to be around, again, big companies, real resources, and the whole 9 yards. And one of my ideas is the whole pipeline thing, right? If we're doing in-person classes here in Asheville, and I do in-person classes in Raleigh, if I can convince my people here, hey, we're doing this whole series of classes in Raleigh, and you just have to go and get a space, that might get people from here to Raleigh so that they can see opportunities, meet people the whole 9 yards. And then if I can get people from Raleigh to come from Asheville, I can show them how much more fun it would be to run a startup in a place with copious amounts of beer and mountains. Just kind of ignore the disaster zone. It's a lovely place, as long as you don't try to drink the water. Don't drink the water. But good news, we got so much beer. We got so much beer. You can bathe in beer. You can wash your clothes in beer. Beer works, right? Anyways, so that's kind of like the idea, the concept. I don't know. We'll see how it works. Let's see, anything else? Again, all class materials and all that kind of stuff. You go to GitHub, Silicon Dojo online classes. You can find all the notes for the classes that we do. This is completely available to you. Classes will be on YouTube afterwards, so I have a camera right here that's actually recording all this in 4K, which does a much better job than Zoom does. So if you want to watch these classes afterwards, or you miss a class or whatever, you can come to Eli the Computer Guy YouTube channel, I don't know, somewhere between around 24 hours later, and it'll be up there. And if you want to follow me or whatever on LinkedIn, I guess this is a social, what are you doing? This is a social media site that everybody thinks is cool anymore, so I'm on LinkedIn. That's what we got. And the final bit, if you have questions, do ask questions by raising your hands in Zoom. Wherever the hell that is. Do it in Zoom, and as soon as I get a moment, I will answer your questions. So there you go. Any questions before we start our introduction to JavaScript class today? No questions. We gotta do this. We gotta do JavaScript. I don't like JavaScript. Can I be honest with you? I don't like JavaScript. JavaScript. Why don't I like JavaScript? I don't know. It's just weird in like the tech world. And this is one of the things I want you to know. I come to you, I'll be honest. I'll cry like a baby so you understand how this stuff really works. The reason people like things or dislike things in the tech world is because they do. I don't know, I like Python. I like PHP. I liked Visual Basic back in the day. Those were good, pure languages. I don't know, JavaScript. I just get cranky when I deal with JavaScript. But it doesn't matter. We need it to build modern systems. And so that's just what it is. So when we're thinking about JavaScript, right? Again, so we've done other languages, right? So the core language that we learn here at Silicon Dojo is Python. And one of the great things about Python, it is a back-end programming language, and it basically talks to everything, right? If you need to connect to databases, done. If you need to build web applications, done. If you need to connect to APIs, done. Most of the stuff that we do, Python is just absolutely awesome for doing it. Again, there are what are called JavaScript frameworks, right? So ways of doing JavaScript that will allow you to do many things like you can do in Python, but they just don't quite do it as well, again, the way that I like, I suppose. There are other languages such as C# that allow you to build things on the Microsoft stack. I've heard nothing bad about C#. I don't build on the Microsoft stack, so I don't use C#. Now, that's one of the big things to be thinking about with any of these kind of programming languages. Again, it always goes back to what type of problem are you trying to solve, and then pick the language for it. Again, that's why I talk about, like with QuickBooks. You could theoretically write a term paper in QuickBooks. It would be a horrible experience for everybody involved, so that's why you use Word or Google or Docs or whatever the hell it is, right? Just because you can do something, right? Anyways, that's the same thing with programming languages. You just find the one that does whatever you need to do as easily, whatever, as possible. So we talk about JavaScript. Right, so JavaScript is basically, it is a front-end programming language. So when we talk about back-end versus a front-end programming language in the web app world, the back-end programming language, this is going to be running on the server itself. So we think about Python, we think about PHP, we think about Ruby on Rails, a version of JavaScript, something called Node.js. Those are all running on the server itself. When we talk about front-end programming languages, I don't know, is there anything other than JavaScript at this point in time? TypeScript, I suppose, but anyways. Basically, JavaScript runs inside the web browser itself. Now, the important thing about that is if you have a back-end programming language, all of the logic, all of the processing happens on the server, right? So if you want performance to be fast, to be able to do things really quickly, the issue is all the commands have to be sent all the way back to the server. Server has to take time, has to process, has to send the information back to you. And so there's a whole rigmarole. One, there's a time, there's a lag, a latency when you have to do that type of thing. And two, there's a resource consumption issue, right? Every time you have to query the server, that's a teeny weeny amount of resources that server has to use. Again, you got 10 users using your system, who the hell cares? You got 10,000 users using your system, it might matter. You got 100,000 users your system, it does start to matter at that point in time. So the more processing, the more crap you can have be done on the front end, the less resources are going to be required on the back end. And the nice thing too is, again, when you start using these front end languages, everything is happening within the web browser itself, so it just happens there. There's no lag, there's no latency. As long as your computer is worth a damn, when you click or when you do something, it will just work. And so when we start talking about JavaScript, we're talking about that front-end language. We look at different languages that you're going to be using in order to create a web application. I talk about the whole house scenario, all right? So let's say you're building a house. Let's say your web application is a house. And so when you're dealing with HTML, so HTML is like the core language you need to learn. Don't worry, it'll take you all of 5 minutes to learn it, but it's a core language you need to learn in order to build web applications. And basically what this does is it creates the foundation, it creates the beams, it essentially creates the roof for your house, right? So this is going to be your web app, and so, all that basic structure is going to be HTML. Then you're going to be looking at this, and you're like, well, that looks like a Linux administrator designed it, which they probably did. You know, we wanted to have some color. We wanted to have some windows. We wanted to have some flowers outside and be pretty. Basically what this is CSS, something called cascading style sheets. This is what gives all the prettiness and all that kind of nice thing to the web app of your house. Basically underneath that is then going to be JavaScript. So in JavaScript, basically think about this as all the functionality in your house. Right? The light bulbs in your house to give your house light, the dishwasher or the washing machine to wash stuff in your house, possibly the toilet so that you can actually poop things out your house, the whole 9 yards. That is where JavaScript fits into this particular stack. You then have the operating system. So the operating system is going to be like the connectivity. So when you have the connection to the electrical, you have the connection to the plumbing, you have little storage tanks or whatever else. This kind of stuff is going to be the operating system. So we deal with operating system commands and that type of thing. Then you have Python. Python, or your back-end programming language, connects the APIs and all that kind of thing. So think about those as the water utility or the electric utility, and you're connecting back there, and basically they're checking to make sure that you paid your bill, and if you've paid the bill, then they're going to send you water. That's Python and such. And then you have SQL. It provides the actual storage and retrieval of data. Alright, so this is Python here, and then imagine, in that water company, they have to have tanks in order to store water. It all makes me sad at this point. Anyways, they have to have reservoirs that don't look like chocolate milk. Anyways, and that would be SQL, structured query language. And so when you look at building this web application, these are all the languages that are going to be part of it. HTML is going to be your structure. CSS is what's going to make it pretty. JavaScript is kind of going to want to make it functional on that front end. OS is going to give you your connectivity. Python, to the back end language, is going to give you the resources to actually bring in power or water or whatever else. And then something like SQL, structured query language, a database, is basically going to be whatever the electric company or the municipality needs in order to provide the services. And that's kind of what this looks like at the end of the day. We start taking a look at this and what this actually looks like. We can start taking a look at some scripts, right? So we have script.html. So basically, when you do JavaScript, this can just be an HTML document. This will run, for the most part, locally on your computer. You don't have a back end. You don't have a back end, so ergo, you do not need a server. You can just literally have this as a file. So I don't know if you can really see that, but this is the file that's literally just sitting on my desktop, and that is the file we are more or less going to be working with all day. And I do not need a server. There is no LAMP stack, there's no WAMP stack, there's no XAMPP stack, there's no Bottle or Django or anything else. This is simply a document that is sitting on my computer. When you double click it, it opens up in your web browser of choice, and you go from there. So again, if we take a look at what JavaScript kind of looks like, we can go here. Let's see, settings, font size. Okay, we'll go here and kind of give you an idea. And so button, so we're going to create a button in HTML. So with all this kind of stuff, it comes together. HTML, CSS, JavaScript is all kind of one thing. So we're going to create a button in HTML, right? This is a button tag, and we're going to close the button tag, and we're going to call it button. Then we're going to add, in the middle here, is a JavaScript command. So on click, when somebody clicks the button, we are going to do this alert. So alert function, basically it pops up a pop-up box, right, on your browser, and we are going to say hello world. So basically if I go over here and I pull up my JavaScript thing, right, refresh this, hopefully you folks can see this, we have a button right here, that's all we have on the page. I click on said button and we get hello world. Yay! You know JavaScript. That's basically what JavaScript does. Everything else from here is downhill, right? So you'll notice we go up here, I'm in the web browser, desktop, js.html. All this is an HTML document. And again, that's what I talk about with JavaScript, giving you that kind of functionality. If I go and I copy some other code, so basically with this code here, I'll show it to you. And so we're going to be embedding the script, so we'll talk about this in a minute. We're going to be embedding the script onto the HTML document. And so on the document.write, so we're actually just going to write something to the document, and we're going to write whatever the current date is, right? And so with this, we do not need to make a call back to a server or anything else. We are simply going to get what the date is. I'm going to hit refresh, and so it gives me Friday, November 1st, 2024 at 2:24. All right, if I refresh this, and it now says 2:24:38. Oops. If I refresh this, 2:24:43, so on and so forth, right? And so the cool part about all this is, like, with this kind of time thing, this is all happening locally on my system. There is not being made a call to anything else. Okay, so things to think about with security, right? So that's one of the things I talked about here is basically you get to dump your resource load. So this was a bit of a disaster for cybersecurity not too long ago, because there were a lot of founders out there, and they were like, wow, how can we reduce our resource consumption in order to provide services to gazillions and gazillions of users? And what they thought is, hey, what if we did everything in JavaScript, right? We'll design our whole infrastructure to be around JavaScript. We'll send all this data to the end user, and then JavaScript will deal with the data on their side, and then ergo we get less resource consumption. Yay! Here's the thing. All this stuff gets sent. It gets sent to the user. Right? So if I go to see source, see how I actually see the JavaScript right there. So if I sent my code along with a whole bunch of data to the end user, they could literally just pop this open and they could see everything underneath. This is one of the issues that you saw recently, where there is a particular governor in a southern state that was oh so stupid. Basically, there was a newspaper. There's a newspaper, and the newspaper reported on the fact that it was like one of the government websites, one of the government web apps. Basically, it was showing like people's social security numbers and all that kind of stuff. And literally, all the newspaper had to do was like right-click, show source, and all of this information was just sitting there. The governor literally tried to sue them and go after them legally for hacking. Oh. I would appreciate if politicians did not reinforce our impressions of what they were actually like. But that was the thing, right? Because some programmer at some point said, hey, what if we just send all the text, right, all the ASCII or whatever UTF-8 to the end user, and then their computer can do all the processing, and that relieves it straight on the government servers. And so they just sent the first names and the last names and the social security numbers and a whole bunch of other information, and then had JavaScript deal with it. And that was not a good idea. So to be careful about it from a security standpoint. One of the cool things with JavaScript is something called HTML5 APIs. This is going to be cool, and this is going to be sexy, and this is going to be amazing. One of the reasons I want to do this JavaScript class, because basically, on your computer, or really on your smartphone, one of the amazing things about modern web browsers is there are actually APIs to connect to the web browser itself. Right, that's a big thing to understand, especially if you're new to programming. When you hear about APIs, application programming interfaces, most of the time you're thinking, right, websites, Twitters of the world, or Twilios of the world, or something like that, which is generally what you normally use it for. But you do have to realize there's APIs for all kinds of different things. There's most likely an API for your networking equipment. Cisco, it used to be called Cisco One, God knows what it's called anymore. There was actually an API that was created by Cisco so that you can interact with your networking environment programmatically. So one of the cool things that there is as far as HTML5 goes and JavaScript is there's these things called HTML5 APIs in your web browser that allows you to do a lot of really cool, powerful things that you most likely think only a native app can do, right? So if you want somebody's very specific geolocation, when I say very specific, I mean actually pulls off the GPS unit on the phone itself, there is an HTML5 API for that. If you want your phone to buzz, there's an HTML5 API for that. If you want to be able to control a web app, by moving your hand around using accelerometers. There's an HTML5 API for that. There's just a tremendous number of HTML5 APIs that allow you to do really cool things. And again, remember, what is my favorite buzzword for the 2020s is AI is hard, APIs are not. Again, a lot of this stuff, the initial programming to make this crap work, I am not smart enough to figure that out. But I can't figure out how to use an API. So that's going to be something we're going to have classes in the future because that's its own. Each one of those things can take about 10 minutes to explain. So that's going to be there. We start talking about JavaScript, just so you understand with syntax. Again, that's one of the big things with all these different programming languages. One of the things that makes it hard is all this different syntax. So we've been using Python a lot. So with Python, line breaks, and then the spacing, the indentation matters for the code blocks. That's how Python deals with things. JavaScript is an older programming language. Back in the days before we learned of the dangers of spaghetti code. So it doesn't have any of that crap. White space does not matter for JavaScript. If you want to create one line that metaphorically goes from here to the moon and does something, God help you, you can literally do that, right? In the JavaScript world, you're going to be using semicolons. Semicolons are the delimiter. Past that, you can write this crap however the hell you want to write it. So that gets to be a fun thing. Again, with these older whatever programming languages, JavaScript or CSS or even HTML, there was something called obfuscation that can be done. There was a concept called minifying. So if you go back about 10 years, web browsers weren't quite as fast as they are today. And so it actually takes a fraction of a second in order to read white space. So theoretically, the more white space you had in your JavaScript program, the longer it would take to run. I mean, by fractions, but anyways, it did. So there used to be a process, probably still exists, called minifying. And what you can do with minify is you run your code through code that minifies, and all that does is rip out all the extraneous white space, which basically means you just get this block of code. God help you on that one. So anyways, just one of those things to remember again since we've been using Python. So when I use indents here, when I use that type of formatting, I'm doing that for readability, not for actual functional use. When you start thinking about using JavaScript, again, for your programs, remember, anything that runs on the back end, anyways, wherever the hell my Python is, where's my Python? Anyway, anything that runs on the back end, the user really can't block unless they do something horribly stupid, right? If you're doing a connection to the database on the back end, if you're doing API calls on the back end, if you're doing that kind of stuff on the back end, they can't really block it again unless they do something horribly stupid. One of the things you do have to be careful about, though, with JavaScript is that there are JavaScript blockers that people intentionally install, and there's nothing more hilarious than a startup founder going to a demo day and their demo crashing and burning because their own JavaScript blockers are blocking their own damn app from functioning properly. And so again, this is one of those things you have to think about when you're developing your app. When you use JavaScript, it is going to have better performance. It's going to be slicker. It's going to be faster. You decrease resource load in your systems and all that kind of stuff. But if they have JavaScript blocker, it might entirely break and not work worth a damn. So one of the things to be thinking about, again, when you start designing your architecture, when you start designing your system, that whole question, do I want JavaScript to do this or do I want Python to do this? One of the questions is things like security and performance and that type of thing. And one of the other questions is how much control do I have over the user's environment, right? If this is a corporate environment, or it's something that vendors are going to buy, like this is a business-to-business type service or whatever, use all the JavaScript you want. Tell them to turn off their JavaScript blockers, and if they don't do it, they're stupid. Who the hell cares, right? Anyways, but if you're dealing with like normal users, if you're dealing with average people, and they may have JavaScript blockers on, and your app doesn't work, that might not be a way to go, right? That's the decisions in the programming world. One of the things I say is, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. You got a cat? You got to skin that thing? Oh my God, there's so many ways to skin the cat. Do you have a sharp knife? Do you have a soup spoon? Anyway. The other thing too to be thinking about with JavaScript is a lot of web browsers actually have built-in components to block certain types of JavaScript functionality, which again can be a complete disaster. So that's where, you know, that's the whole thing with all this programming is test, 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 and really understand why you're doing whatever the hell it is that you're trying to do. Okay, with that, let's get into the JavaScript a little bit. So we're going to be embedding JavaScript into our programs, into our web applications. The first thing that we can do is we can simply embed within essentially HTML tags. So you have seen the script tag before, and so we open a script tag, we close a script tag, we create a variable called message. We use let to do that. Let message equal hello world, and then we're going to do document.write what that message is. Right? So basically what I can do is I can just Control C, and I go here, kind of like we did before, right? So this is the entire script. I can do Control S, and then we go to my thing, and we refresh, and now it says hello world. Right, so that's one of the ways that we can embed in a script, and it's very easy, especially again if you're embedding things like date, time, little messages. That's a great way to do it. The next thing that you can do too is you can actually though call from another script. So we have this. Is there a script.js? Hold on one second. Let me create a script.js. Live demos. Document dot right. Hello again from another script. What's that called? Script.js. Control save as. Okay, so basically what we're going to be doing here, again, we have this that we're embedded normally, and then what we can call a script from somewhere else, right? So script src equals script.js, nothing between the closing tags, and hopefully it's going to call it properly. And so if we go here, and we do a refresh, hold on one second. What am I doing wrong? Oh, it's been a long day. Have you ever had long days? Probably had long days. Script.js. Oh, yeah, forgot to do semicolon. Sorry. Again, if you forget any of this stuff. So in script.js, I forgot to do semicolon, Control S. And so if we go here and we do refresh, oh, for the love of God. Document.write. Document.write, hello, again, you too. Alright. Script.js. src script.js. Anyways. Oh, because it's not, did I not save it? No. Save your documents. Jesus Christ. Spaghetti monster. Jesus spaghetti monster. Anyways, remember to save your documents when you're doing a live demo. Lordy. So anyways, this is calling the script using the tags. This is calling the script to another script, right? So basically we're calling, so this is one thing you can do is you can create really long JavaScript. Again, you can do very, very complicated things, so you can have it in its own file, so you have that nice directory structure, and so instead of having to write it in your HTML document, it could be somewhere else, and then all you have to do is call it. And again, for this particular example, again, so hello world, that's what's embedded into the HTML document itself, and then we're calling hello again from another script, and that's the other script running. What's always funny with noobs get in this field, I'm like, why do you want to get in this field? I'm like, Eli, because I want everybody to know how smart I am. Ah, find another profession, bucko. Find another profession. You will learn how stupid you are. Oops, Jack. Oops. Do you have a question, Jack?
I think you just answered it. So basically, I was trying to figure out like what was happening. I couldn't figure out what you were doing, so I was doing. But basically, your HTML, that script.js is just a link to the other, to that other document right there.
Yep.
So why? So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, why did you write script.js and it's not doc? So why did the tag is like that? That's what I'm kind of confused. Like how?
That? Why it's like that?
Yeah.
That's a standard. That's just how you embed a script, just how you like use any other tag. This is just how you do it. So you open the script tag, and then instead of having this, you're saying src where my script actually exists, and then you have to have the URL to that location, and that's just how you do it.
So script.js is actually a URL?
Yeah, because script.js is pointing to that little file right there.
Okay.
So I created a file called script.js that happens to reside in the exact same folder as the parent, the script that we're running, and so that's all I have to do. If this was in another location, then you'd have to do, server path, whatever, to get all the way out there. Yep.
Oh, so first you got to create script.js, put a file in there, and so when you call it, it just brings up that file. But if you have different files in script.js, you have to specify the file that you have to do.
No, so script.js is the file. So if I had a folder on my desktop, it would be folder script.js.
Copy.
And it gets more complicated than that. But yeah, that's basically, it's just, you have to give it the path, the file path, wherever that script is.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask questions. Okay, the other way you can actually also embed JavaScript is called an inline event handler. So when we have that button, like I showed you before, you will notice with that I didn't put a script tag before it. There were no script tags anywhere around it, because basically when you have a piece of functionality in your HTML document, you can actually just embed the JavaScript directly into it, and it will fire off. So button on click equals alert hello world, and you close the button. So basically that's all embedded in there, and so you do not need the JavaScript tags for that. We start talking about JavaScript. We're going to get to the DOM. Yeah. And so the DOM is what's called the Document Object Model. So this is one of those things that gets confusing, especially when people are new to HTML and CSS and all that kind of stuff, because you see a lot of information. You're taught to code in a whole bunch of this crap that you don't use until you get to something like JavaScript, right? And so that's one of the reasons a lot of this stuff can be very confusing. Basically what the DOM is, or Document Object Model, is it's a way of creating identifiers within your HTML document so that you can actually do something to them. Again, remember in the computer world, the programming world, you always have to have an identifier to be able to do something, to be able to jump somewhere, to go somewhere, to be able to cause an event to happen. You have to have some kind of pointer to that thing so that the program knows what the hell you're talking about, right? And so that's basically what the Document Object Model allows you to do. So we come down here, you can see, like with this, I'll copy and paste in a second, but we have like H1, name is heading, ID is title. And so again, you may have seen this before with HTML and not use it at all, so you don't understand what this means. Basically what the name means is multiple things can have the same name, and it's a way of categorizing those things together, right? To say these things are kind of the same, or the same enough, so if we want a JavaScript event to trigger something on the name, I want this to affect everything with that particular name. So it might be things, a lot of things, like div boxes might have the same name, p tags might have the same name, a lot of things might have the same name. And so it's like, let's say you wanted to change the color of everything. So, I went to a demonstration a couple months ago with people that had vision problems, and so these people had this web app to change websites and being something that was easier for people to be able to see that had vision problems. So one of the things you could do is you could have like everything that might have like text in it. So H1 and H2 and P tag, you'd all that have be text, and if somebody clicks on a JavaScript link, all that text could be changed to a high contrast color. So whether it's an H2 tag, or whether it's a P tag, or whether it's an href, they all change to that high contrast color is the idea. Then you have the ID. IDs are absolutely unique. They're supposed to be absolutely unique, and if they're not absolutely unique, you're going to have some fun errors. Basically what the ID is that this is that thing. When JavaScript triggers, and it triggers for that ID, then this element, and only this element, is going to be worked against. So that's one of the big things. So let's take this. Let's copy this, let's go over here, and again you'll notice I'm not even bothering to have multiple scripts today because you really can't just copy and paste all of this to have it run. Just so you know, // this is how we do comments in JavaScript. Again, that's one of the big things with syntax, with all these different programming languages. You know what you want to do. Doesn't necessarily mean you know the keystrokes to make it happen, right? This is what can be frustrating, right? In the Python world, it's pound signs, hash signs that give you comments. In the JavaScript world, it is that. Let me shrink this just a little bit so it's easier to see. That's a little bit better, right? Okay, so basically with this, we have an H1 name is heading, ID is title, this is the title. Then I say P, words, and some more words. H2, name is heading, so these have the same name. ID is next title, it is different. This is another layer. P, and more words. And then we close this. Then we open the script, sorry. Then we open the script down here. So this is all HTML, and then we open the script. And what we're going to do here is we're going to fire off the script. So document.getElement by ID. So we're going to get an element by the ID, so the ID is title. So we're going to get this element, we're going to say inner HTML, so this is basically what's inside the HTML. We want to say just simply a new message, just so you get the point, right? So this is the title, and so we do this. So we run this now. Right, this is the title, words, this is another layer, and more words, right? So now, I uncomment that, I do Control S, I do a refresh, and now we see a new message. So JavaScript was able to modify the HTML that was within this particular ID. Now I go here, and we do Command, block, okay. This gets a little bit more complicated. This is all relatively simple. Again, ChatGPT is amazing. To be clear, ChatGPT is not artificial intelligence. It's still very useful. If you want to figure out how to do these things, ask ChatGPT. It'll spit out the answer for you really easily. So anyways, document.querySelectorAll. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be finding all the P tags and basically putting them into an array. Then we're going to say for each of the items in the array, we're going to be running this little function here, element.style.background color equals green. So all you really need to know here, we'll go into this more as the class goes on, is we're going to select all the P tags, and then wherever there's a P tag, we want to make the background color of that P tag green. I hit S, I then run this, and now look at this. So all of my P tags, the background color is now green. All right, then we can go down here, just to finish this off. Again, document.querySelector, name equals heading, right? So we go up here, name is heading, so both of these two. For each function, style, color, red. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making the color of the text red. And then when we do this, we'll see both a new message and this is another layer. Those are now red. And so this is the basic idea of how you use the DOM, the Document Object Model, to be able to interact with very specific components or elements within your HTML document. Any questions? If you don't understand the exact code, that's fine, but is there any questions on the overall concept? Nope? Okay. Let's go here. When we're doing elements, again, in order to get elements, you can do document.getElementById. So by ID is that specific name. There can only be one on the entire page. You can get elements by class name. So if you have a CSS class and you want to change everything in the CSS class, you can do that. And you can get elements by tag name, such as div or Ps or H1s, like we did. And those are the ways that you can interact with specific elements. You then have the properties that you can interact with. So, document.getElementById, whatever the ID is. .inner HTML, that's basically going to be that inner HTML, whatever the text is. And so we can say hello world here, right? So I can get this particular ID, and then I can change the text that's inside it to hello world. And this is kind of how the JavaScript world works, where it's something dot something dot something in order for things to occur. It's a very, like when we're dealing with Pythons, we deal with methods, variable name dot split, right, or whatever else, very much like that. You deal with that a lot in the JavaScript world. Document.getElementById, let's say P, then we can say style.color equals blue. So I want the color of the text in the p tags to be blue. This is how I would change that in the document. So this is basically, again, relatively simple. You then have events. And again, this is where the cool functionality of JavaScript really comes to the fore. As people are interacting with your web page, with whatever interactive device that they're using, different things can happen. Again, so most of the time, when we're talking about desktop computers, we got a mouse. But again, with those HTML5 APIs, it could be the accelerometer, it could be other things, right? And basically, the events are basically how you trigger something to happen. So you can trigger a mouse event on a click. Basically, you fire something off when it's clicked, when it's double clicked, when the mouse is down, when the mouse is up, when the mouse enters, when the mouse leaves, when the mouse moves, when the mouse over, the mouse out. Context member, when you click, I think, on the right mouse button. Basically, all these are all the different options that you have for something on the page. So basically, when you, let's say when you click on a, let's say a forum item, right? You have a little text box on a form and you click on that, you could fire off an event to happen when somebody clicks on that. Like they're about to log in and they go to log in and you pop up a little box and you say, hey, if you're a hacker, we're going to sue the hell out of you. Right? I don't know. Basically, those are the different types of things that you can do. There are keyboard events. Again, this is interesting. So key down, key press, key up. Basically, when you press a key, different things can happen. So if I press the K key, so like when you play like online games, right, and you might have a keyboard to play online games, arrows or whatever else, basically what you're doing is you're mapping the keystroke to events in the game. I hit spacebar, on spacebar down, gunfire, right? That's basically what's going on here. Forms, so this is going to be a big one, especially when we get into more security stuff. When you submit a form, when you reset a form, when things get focused, all those kinds of things. Basically, whenever these kind of events happen, you can trigger a JavaScript something to occur. We can show you that with this particular project. Oops. What is going on? Somebody hacking my box. What the hell? Okay. So basically, what we have here is a very simple script. H1, we're going to have an ID, a display key. We're going to say press a key to display here. So basically when we press a key, it'll be displayed there. We're going to have a form, input type equals text. Placeholder, basically it's just going to say type here. And the ID for this is going to be input field. So we have constants. So when we're dealing with JavaScript and we're dealing with variables, I guess this is later in the class, but we'll go into it now because we're talking about it. Basically, there are three variable types. There is a let, a var, and a constant. Var you should not use anymore. So let and constants are the variable types that you're supposed to use. Basically, let allows you to create a variable with a scope of whatever the code is. It doesn't have what's called a global scope. So when you're dealing with variables in the programming world, there is local scoped and global scoped variables. And the idea is a global scoped variable is it can be called from anywhere in the script. It can be modified many times from anywhere in the script. So you have to be very careful about global scoped variables. And that's what vars used to be. They were global scoped variables. Let, on the other hand, is a local scoped variable, so you can only use it within the code block that you're interacting with. And that means that doesn't leak out somewhere else. That can be very important, again, when you start dealing with code, that's 500 lines, 1,000 lines, 10,000 lines of code, and you're using different variables or whatever. It's very easy all the way at the end to accidentally call a variable that you originally created in the beginning, but you're using it for something else at the end, and everything kind of goes to hell. So anyways, that's the let and the var. You only use let now. The constant, so this is constant, this is normal in all programming languages. We don't use it a lot just because it's not useful in many of our classes. What a constant is that when you set the variable, it does not get modified. Constant means this is always what the variable is going to be. Basically, think of it as a read-only variable. We're going to create the variable, we're going to set the variable, and then you can look at it. You can't change it though, right? And so again, for things like this, constants are very useful. One of the things I will tell you, since we are talking about variables right at this point in time, is there are no data types by default in JavaScript. So we talked about data types many times before, whether dealing with no databases or programming languages or anything else. Like with Python auto types the data when you put it into it, whether it's a string, whether it's an int, whether it's a float. Basically, you don't necessarily code that in with Python. It will automatically take a look at the data that it's dealing with, and it will auto-type that data. A lot of programming languages, you actually have to say what the data type is. This is an int. When we create a variable, so there's creating a variable and setting a variable. Creating is when you actually create the variable, and setting it is when you set it to some value. In some programming languages, when you create a variable, you actually have to set it to whatever data type it's supposed to be. In JavaScript, that is not there by default. Because one of the important things you have to understand about JavaScript is this was a pretty crappy language back in the day. In the long ago, in the before times, before the Great Recession, JavaScript was just kind of a cheesy language. Like, one of the reasons I laugh at JavaScript, one of the reasons I kind of laugh at Node.js developers, is because I'm an ass and I remember the before times. Basically, all JavaScript used to be was if you wanted drop-down boxes, like you had a drop-down menu. If you went back to 2005, that's basically what JavaScript gave you. If you moused over an image, it would change the image. That's what it was, right? And so when all you're doing is drop-down boxes and on hover, right? People really didn't give a damn about data types. The funny thing about JavaScript, again, weird how technology goes, is this kind of crappy-ass programming language that was only used to, add some confetti or whatever to websites. And somewhere around 2010, 2011, people started taking it really, really, really seriously. And then that's where we start getting frameworks such as Node.js and jQuery and a whole bunch of other things come out there. And then all of a sudden, the problem that you run into, again, this is one of the issues that you have in the real technology world, tell me if you've heard this before, is you have a core piece of technology being used to solve problems it was never designed to solve. And then you run into quirky issues, such as got no data type. And again, I know if you're just looking at this, who the hell cares? Whatever, it's whatever. 13 lines of code, who the hell cares if you have some data types? The issue they run into, though, again with Node and these other things, is you start writing bigger and bigger and bigger JavaScript programs, and all of a sudden, if you screw up the type of data going in, you might get some weird issues. Again, 2 plus Bob equals what is not something you want to run into. So anyways, there is no data types. That's where you hear about something called TypeScript that a lot of people use nowadays, a lot of the real coders use, and literally the idea behind TypeScript is to give types, data types, to JavaScript. Anyways, so we're going to create constant display key equals get element display key. So we're going to display whatever click up there, and constant input field. So we're going to get the idea, the value in from ID. Input field, and then basically input field dot add event listener key down. So we're going to have an event listener on input field. So input field, we're going to listen. If we see key down, we're going to fire off this function event display key text content equals key pressed And then basically right here, what this is going to give us is what the key pressed is. So basically this is what's it called? A template literal. We're going to talk about concatenation in a minute. This is something called template literal. And so it's going to tell us what key has been pressed. So I hit Control S. And we find my thing. We do a refresh, right? Press A key to display here. And I press H. Or J, or L, or K, or Y, or that, or that, or that. See, again, you talk about that with video games. That left, 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 or right, right, right. Spacebar, spacebar. That spacebar doesn't show up. Anyways, right? And so this is the way that using JavaScript, basically we can capture those keyboard inputs, and then again, with a little bit more programming, we can then make something interesting happen. Let's see here. Then past that, the next thing that we have is the hover. Let's see here. Okay, so again, H1 ID, so this is the ID of this element, hover over this text. Right, then we have the script. Constant hover text equals document.getElement by ID hover text. Right, so this is how we're going to interact with this going forward. Original text, so constant original text equals hover over this text, right? Constant hover message, you're hovering over me. Then we're going to do hover text, add event listener. The event listener is mouse over, so we're just going to scroll over that thing. We're going to fire a function, hover text.text content equals hover message. Right, so the hover message is that. Then hover text, add event listener, mouse out, so mouse goes away. Basically we're going to change to the original text. I hit Control S. We go here to refresh. So again, we have hover over this text. I go over, you're hovering over me. I go out, hover over this text. So you can use this for like interactive things. Again, think about this, you're creating quizzes, that type of thing. Like think about this as a flashcard. You could ask the user what the question is, and then when they hover over it, they can see what the answer is. That kind of thing. But again, this is just giving you a very broad overview of the different things that you can do with JavaScript. Oh, Jock, what's up?
So this is just a kind of like a thought experiment and something I heard about before. So with the last function with the mouse click and keyboard punch, if you put that you add that to a database, so basically you can record what keys you're punching at a certain time. And that's why I was wondering, is it possible that someone can record they put a piece of script in it's basically JavaScript, on your local computer. They can basically record your keystrokes of what you're doing. They might not know what it is, but they can kind of record keystrokes in a database and sort of.
No, that wouldn't be done through JavaScript. So the website that you're on, so let's say this is a super secret spy website being run by the NSA. As I'm here, as I'm typing things in, they can record everything that I'm typing in. This is actually something used it used to be called e-biometrics. They probably have a new name for it now. But it was continuous authentication. So one of the issues you have with security is you authenticate in, you identify yourself the first time, but then 5 minutes from now, how does the system know you're still the same person? 10 minutes from now, they don't want you to plug in the passwords all the time. So what they can do is they can actually analyze your keystrokes while you're using the particular web application and basically pattern match that to how you normally use the application to kind of like do this continuous identity thing. But that's all on the app itself. If you want to do actual keyboard logging or whatever else, yeah, that's a different class, a different programming language you would use.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Let's see here. Okay, everybody have a good idea on that? Does that all make sense? So we get the variables. All right, just talked about variables. Again, we have vars, we have lets, and we have constants. Var is what you're generally going to be using. So var x equals 1, and then semicolon. So whenever you, when you finish a line of the JavaScript code, you're going to use a semicolon. So that is, you will see that in old code, and you're not supposed to use that anymore. If you see this in old code, and you change it to let, and all of a sudden the code breaks, again, one of the things I want you to think about is that global scope. And then the question you really have to ask yourself, is it worth the time and effort to figure out what the hell's going on, or are you just going to put it back to var? Let, again, is how you're supposed to do it nowadays. It gives you that more constrained local scope, and then constant just means you can't modify it, you can't change it. Let's see here. Then we get the concatenation. So this is always the fun one. Okay, so concatenation is basically what you're going to be doing with concatenation is you're going to be combining a static data with dynamic data. So again, here we have a message. So this message could be coming from a REST API call, it could be coming from a database, it could be coming from somewhere else. And so we want to marry the message to H1 tags, right? And so the easiest way to do this is what is called a template literal. And this is basically like an F string in the Python world, right? So if we do this, so let message equal hello world. Again, this is being printed out onto an HTML document, so we have to use HTML formatting for it to work properly. So we basically want to put this within H1 tags, and so you use what are called backticks. So to be clear, this is a single quotation mark. This is not where you're going to be using. That would be too easy. The backtick. So I don't know. Oh, if I pull up one of these umpteen computers, I have the side. The backtick is this one up here. Single quotation mark is here. No, no, no. No, no, single quotation mark. You're going to be using backtick, this thing up here. Looks damn near the same. Looks damn near the same. Not the same, though. Anyways, we're going to then do Control S for the concatenation. And with that, you can see we now have hello world, and it's within those H1 tags. So again, that's going to be one of the very important things to be thinking about with JavaScript, is remember, you're marrying JavaScript to HTML. So not only do you have to output whatever the value is from JavaScript, but you also have to think about how that's going to be formatted on the particular web page. Again, either you're going to be doing like inner HTML, so an element that already exists, you'll be modifying that, or you have to add this kind of stuff in order to make it work properly. Beyond that, again, for concatenation, there are a few ways to do concatenation. I like template literals, but you can also do the pluses. Again, you'll have seen this in the Python and the other worlds. Basically, this is where we do pluses. And this can get idiotically long. Again, pluses are fine, right? So anyway, script, let greeting equal hello, let message equal world. So we do document.write, so we're writing on the screen. So within single quotation marks, we do the H1 tag. So we open with the H1 tag. Then we do plus the value for greeting. Then we do plus single quotation marks space single quotation marks. That gives us a space in the middle. Plus the value for message. Plus close the H1 tag within the single quotation marks. And of course, do remember to end with the semicolons. All this stuff, you need semicolons, and if you don't do the semicolon, it's not going to work. So we go here, and actually it's going to give us the same thing. Here, let me, hello world, again. Make that slightly different, so you see that there's a difference here. And that's one of the other ways to do concatenation. Again, template literals, I don't know, somebody can raise their hand if they know a reason not to do template literals, but it does seem to be the best way to do it for me, at least the easiest way to do it. We have loops, so when we deal with loops, in Python, we only deal with while loops. So there's for loops and there's while loops. Basically in JavaScript, most other programming languages, there are multiple other loops. They all kind of get you to the same place at the end of the day, but whatever. So you have something called the for loop in for loop in JavaScript. And basically with the for loop, what this is going to do is you configure everything in the beginning. Alright, so this is just going to print it out on the screen. Basically, the big thing in the for loop is for. Then we're going to create and we're going to set the variable that we are iterating against. So we're going to start and then plus, 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 plus. So we're going to let I, basically for iteration, equals 0. So we create the I variable, we set it to 0. Then we do semicolon. So basically, think about this. This is a command, and then this is the command, and that's the final one. So we create and set I to 0. Then we say while I is less than 5, so less than 5 is not 5, it's less than 5, continue to the loop, and then at the end of the loop do I++ to iterate, right? So message plus equals, this is iteration number I, break. So what this is going to do is this is iteration number 1, break. 2 break, 3 break, so on and so forth. And at the end, we're going to document dot write out the entire message. So we're going to create the entire message, and then once this while loop is over, it'll fire off to the screen. So when we do this, pretty simple, not much to see. This is iteration 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, if you're doing something more complicated with programming, that's what you would do. And so when you're dealing with for loops, you create and set the variable, you assign how long the event should go for, how long the loop should go for, and then you iterate at the end. That's a for loop. You then have the other loops, so the while loops. Basically the same kind of thing, slightly different. So up here, what we're going to say is let I equal 0. So we're going to create and set the I up here. While I is less than whatever, I put 15 here. Message is going to plus equal, so we're just going to create that message, and then here we do I++. So we set the variable value outside, we do the conditional here, and then we iterate at the bottom. Not a lot to it, so with this, again, you do it, now you get it 14 times. Same stuff. Then the final loop that we do here is do whiles. And again, this is one of the things that can be very confusing with programming languages. Like, why are there 20 ways to solve any problem? I don't know. Different people thought it was a good idea. All right, so with a do while loop is let I equal 0. Again, that whole message thing. So do message plus equals. Then we iterate here while I is less than 5. And we do the document right at the end. So create and set the variable value, do something, iterate within the do, continue doing while the conditional is not true. And again, I don't know, we can do 50 on that one, and you can kind of get the point. So with JavaScript, again, there can be 20 different ways to skin the exact same cat. So that's basically how the while loops work. Let's see here. The if-else statements are getting pretty close to the end. So if-else looks a lot like most other programming languages. Again, if-else, that's one of the things like with programming languages, like once you understand the basic concepts, almost all programming languages work more or less the same way. Again, they just use different syntax. So with the if-else statement in the JavaScript world, basically you do if, you have the conditional, kind of sort of like it looks before, then you have the squiggly, then you have else if. So again, in Python, it's elif. In JavaScript, it's else if. So if age is less than or equal to 90, you are too old. Else if age is less than 90 and age is greater or equal to 21. And again, this is that whole syntax thing, right? When we do Python, you literally type out and. When you do JavaScript, a lot of other programming languages, it's whatever this and symbol is, either one or two of those, that's how you do an and. So this condition and this condition, please enter you are old enough, if age is less than 21, you're too young, else, and I always like to put the final else in, message equals, that's weird, right? And so if you take a look at this, it looks a lot like what we've done before. So H1 ID equals entry, so this is going to be the ID that we're going to be doing. What's your age? We're going to have a form. ID, age form. So the ID of the form is age form. Input type text, placeholder age, question marks. When this pops up, it's just going to ask you what the age is. And then the ID is input field. Then we're just going to simply do a submit button here. There's nothing else to it. And then we're going to close out the form. So that's the HTML that we're dealing with. The script, entry text equals document.getElementById entry. So basically here is what we want to dynamically modify, entry. Input field, right? Document.getElementById input field. So this is going to be the input where we're getting the information from. age form dot add event listener, right? So the age form is the ID. Add event listener, choose the submit button. Submit. We're then going to fire off a function, event, event.prevent default. So what this prevent default is, so there's a default function for these different elements within HTML. So normally when you hit the submit button, it sends everything off to a form, to a script somewhere. So it sends it to a Python script, it sends it to a PHP script, a Ruby on Rails script. We don't have that back end, so we don't want that. So basically what we're doing here is we're using this function to say, don't do whatever your default thing is. We don't want you to do that, right? And then we're going to create constant age equals number from input field dot value. So the input field, whatever the value here is, that is going to be the value for age. So when I click submit, it's going to grab the value from the input field, and that's going to be age. We're then going to go through this if-else statement. If age is greater than or equal to 90, you're too old. Else if age is less than 90 and age is greater or equal to 21, enter. Else if age is under 21, you're too young. Else message, And then we're going to do entry dot text content, so entry text. Entry text, which goes back to entry. We're going to change the content to whatever that message is, and then we're going to end the script. So if we come here and we take a look at it, again, we start getting a little bit more dynamic. So what is your age? My age is 12. Submit. You're too young. My age is 112. You're too old. My age is 40. Please enter, you are old enough. My age is Bob. And again, you always got to be careful because somebody's going to put in Bob. And you hit enter and you get right? So this is where we start to see we are getting a dynamic response from what the user is inputting here. And again, this is one of those things like when you go to websites, again, especially being here in Asheville and everything is a brewery and it asks you, like what age you are. Again, something like this is how you can basically, ask somebody what their age is and then figure out whether or not they can or cannot get in to your application. Let's see here. So that's that, and then we have functions. So again, this is an introductory class, so we're not going to get into all the stuff with JavaScript. I just want to give you a basic idea of how all this kind of thing works, all these kinds of things work, and so this is where I show you how to create a function, right? So a lot of this stuff that I've been showing you before is basically like an inline, like the function is inline, like, where was it? So we scroll up, right? So we don't create an additional function here, right? Hover.text, add event listener, mouse over, and we literally call the function right here. And this is fine for small scripts. This is going to be fine for small scripts and when you don't have to reuse anything. But again, as your scripts start getting bigger, as you have to reuse stuff, that is not the way to do it. You want to create, full-fledged functions. And so that's basically just showing you how to do that here, the basic idea of it, right? So we're going to create the body for an HTML document. So if you look at a full HTML document, it starts with HTML, then you have a head, open head, close head, then you have a body, open body, close body, then you close your HTML. Most of the time I don't write all that stuff out because you don't need to with HTML5 anymore, but we're actually going to be working on the body, so that's why we're doing that today. We're going to create a text, a little form button thing here. Input type equals text, ID equals color, placeholder, enter a color. They're going to create a button. So the button is on click, check color. We're just going to make that submit and we'll close the button. So this isn't even a form. This is just a text box with its own little button. Basically what we're doing here is when somebody clicks on that button, we are going to fire off the check color function. Check color function is now down here as its own function, right? We open script, we close script. We're going to call function, so we're going to call this function. So again, in Python, you say def, basically define the function. Here you call it a function. Function name is check color. Parentheses, open the squiggly brackets. Constant color equals document.getElementById color value. All right, so this is the ID, so we're going to be getting the value from this text box. Constant body element equals document.getElementById body. So basically I want to get the body as something, that's what we're going to modify. Body.element.style.background color equals the color. So basically I type in a color, and this is going to set the value of the body to whatever that color is that I set. I do Control S. We come over here, I do a refresh. So basically I've just got a text box, enter a color, I've got to submit, and I can say green. Green, oops. I can say green, but will I say green? Green. There we go. We hit submit, and now we can see the entire background color is green. We can do red. We can do aqua. And as we can see, so now basically I'm typing in the color that I want this to be, and then obviously the entire body is changing. So you can change, again, any element within your HTML document, you can modify it based off of something like this. The important thing here is just to kind of get an idea of what the functions look like in the JavaScript world, because again, the syntax with all this kind of stuff is different for the different programming languages. And I think with that, that is about it. The one thing in here I forgot to talk about is a lot of times when you're going to be creating JavaScript, this might seem a little weird, especially coming from the Python world. So one of the things you have to think about whenever you're dealing with programming languages is how does the interpreter read the language? So in Python, one of the problems you can run into is Python interpreter reads from top to bottom. So if you define something on the bottom and you call it from the top, Python is going to fail because you haven't defined it or you haven't set it yet. You have to define before you call. With JavaScript, basically this is all coming up as a web page, so essentially it's not going to fire off until that web page is loaded, and so you can actually define things theoretically after they're called because it should work properly. One of the things you'll notice though is a lot of times JavaScript will be put in the bottom of a web page, which seems kind of weird. So you have like a lot of stuff on the top, or you might have like a lot of lightweight JavaScript at the top, and then a lot of the heavier stuff is sitting at the bottom of the page. The reason for that is, again, do realize this is a web application, especially with your users. You may not know where they are. So if they're having problems with the internet connection, if you put all your JavaScript at the top, and maybe it's doing API calls, something like that, and it's getting slowed down, the rest of the page won't load until all of that information comes in. So again, if JavaScript has to make a call, receive, and then do something to write out on the page, the rest of your page isn't going to load till that crap is kind of done, right? So one of the things is if you put it at the bottom, the page will load, and then if the page kind of locks up on this bottom stuff, your page is already pretty much loaded and the user might not notice. So this might be important for things like tracking. Like if every time a user goes to a page, you want to track what they're doing, you might want to put that tracking code at the bottom so that the user gets the page, as far as they're concerned, they get the page really quickly. And then if there's any kind of quirks with the JavaScript running, they might not necessarily see that. Not sure if that makes a lot of sense. I swear it'll make sense in the future as we explain it. But again, that's one of the kind of things with these different programming languages, kind of thinking about how they load and how users interact with them to understand how some of this stuff works. And that is basically the class. Jock has a question. What's that, Jock?
So, I'm going over the old DIY lab you did before about networks and pinging and things like that. For the example you just showed, it's a lot less code to do that in JavaScript, it seems, in Python. So say, for instance, and it kind of goes off what you just said. We're trying to build a network and ping something to show, like, functionality, whatever. We want to put the main functionality of Python at the very top, and then probably put the JavaScript script at the bottom to show actual pinging.
No, JavaScript and Python don't touch. JavaScript and Python don't touch. This is why we ask questions, and other people can ask questions too. No, so basically what's happening here, again, this is what we talk about the back end of programming languages. They're different worlds. It's upstairs, downstairs. They don't talk to each other. Alright, so basically what happens, like when we're using Bottle. So Bottle is our web app framework that we use in our series for Python. Right? And so we have our little script that's running, and we fire it off. And again, here we've defined our functions, and if somebody goes to root, basically what's going to happen here is we are going to write out, we're either going to write out here or in a template file. Again, Bottle has templates. We'll go into those more later. But one way or another, basically this is going to create what gets sent to the client. And this is going to be HTML, and this is going to be CSS, and this is going to be JavaScript. Right? So SQL is down here. SQL is in the server, REST APIs, all that kind of stuff out there. This is then what gets sent to the user, and that's what creates the page that they're interacting with. So JavaScript can only interact with whatever has been sent to that user's browser. More or less, there's some REST APIs and other stuff, but let's just keep it there, right? And so Python is your back-end language, and basically what Python is doing is it's dynamically writing the web page that's going to be sent to the user. And then what JavaScript is doing is JavaScript is interactively modifying whatever has been sent to the user so that it seems like an interactive web application. Does that make sense? Oh, Jock, did you? Okay, thumb up. There we go. Cool. I still don't fully understand why we use const and not let in many places. Okay. So let is something that is going to be modified. So let's see, where's oh, with the iterations, there we go. Right, so not loops, here we go with loops. Right, so let I equal 0. So when I create the variable I and I set it to a value, one of the important things with this particular variable is that I'm going to be modifying it within the script itself, right? So we're doing this, we're doing the iteration down here. So I starts at 0, we do the loop, then we add 1 to I. We do the loop, and then we add 1 to I again, we add. So we're constantly modifying I. So let is used when we figure that we're going to be modifying the value of the variable. Again, let message equal nothing, and then what we're doing is plus equal, then we're adding to that message, right? That's something that we want added to. On the other hand, if you look at something like this, like if I'm setting the color to the value of this element, I don't want, because color equals this, right? I don't want to screw with that. I don't want color to equal 1. I don't want color to equal, right? Because again, when you start writing code, again, this might seem a little weird, but when you start writing code, it gets very easy to accidentally call the wrong variable and do something stupid with it. Again, in the programming world, in the technology world, the most important thing is that you get a hard fail, right? I know it sounds weird, especially if you're new. Like, why would you want a hard fail? Like, a hard fail is when your system fails. The entire damn thing crashes. You do not have to ask if there's a problem, right? You do something, bloop, it turns off, you got a problem, right? Because then you know you have a problem, right? So with constants, right, if you can't change constant, then if you do try to change a constant in the future, the code is going to fail, and you're going to get a relatively, hopefully, should get an obvious problem. If this is let, though, let's imagine for a second that we're not supposed to change this value, but we set it to let. But think about this, variable name color, right? You might use that somewhere else, right? Maybe even in this block of code, maybe you're not thinking about it, and then you set the value of color to something else entirely, right? Well, then the code will run, and you get like weird errors. You get like, huh, that doesn't make sense. Why is it doing that? And then you'll be able to scratch your head, sip a little coffee. I don't know, maybe it's not broken. Maybe that's the default, whatever with this. So anyway, so that's why I use constants. Constants are when you're not going to change the variable value. You're going to set the variable value, and then you're going to leave it. So things like directory paths, right? If you have a directory paths to your assets, don't change that. You should never change that. You might want to set that to a constant, right? Again, a REST API call. You're going to be connecting to an API. You're going to set that. Nobody's going to modify it. That's what it is, right? Again, you're going to be connecting to specific elements. You don't want to have a futzing with it. So that's why you use constant. Let's see here. Yep. Okay, so yeah, that is the class. That is JavaScript. That's the beginning of JavaScript. We're going to use more JavaScript going in the future, because there's a lot of weird, again, for like not just the interactivity, but for like a lot of the REST APIs, it's interesting. Things like Google Maps. Like, you have to understand how JavaScript works in order to embed Google Maps. It's surprising, like, where JavaScript comes up in like some weird frickin' places. And so, if nothing else, you kind of got to understand how JavaScript works. So that's why I wanted to do this particular class. Again, I do have to say, if you have any questions, ChatGPT is absolutely fabulous on this. If you're not doing anything that's going to, send data somewhere, it's pretty kind of hard to screw up JavaScript to be much of a security issue. But yeah, that's the class. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? No questions. Jock and Johan, you're the only ones with questions? Is anybody else awake? And of course, Jock. Who has a question? Jock. Oh, okay, well, fair enough. He is asking a question. What's up, Jock?
So prior to this class, I bought an old JavaScript book. It's called Head First. Is it valuable to actually read and go through it, or will we just like kind of like use it as a function for Python, or is it good to just check because I'm new to this? Would it be good to just go over the book and start some of the projects in JavaScript? Really?
Probably, yeah. JavaScript isn't like Python. So Python had version 2 and version 3, and do not learn version 2. Like, learning an old version of Python is a waste of time. I mean, unless it's too freaking old. I mean, if it's sub 10 years, maybe you should be fine enough. I can't really see too much of a downside at all. Again, stuff does change. I'm not sure it changes like that much type of deal. So you should be fine. Cool. Okay, anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? You're all quiet. I think you're asleep. I need a koosh ball. That's going to be my $1 billion idea. I have to figure out how to create a virtual koosh ball so I can wing it at you folks over the internet. You're asleep. Wake up. Anyways, I will in my mind believe you are all awake and paying attention. So anyways, yep, that is this class. So next week we're going to have two classes probably. Then we're going to have a class on architecture. Then we're going to have another class on some type of technology. I'm probably going to be splitting it up. Architecture type classes, frankly, are just easier to do than technical type classes, especially as we're going along. So probably do like one architecture type class and one technical class per week as I create all these. Again, as I said, we do have the new meetups. So we have the online meetup, obviously. That's where you're at now. Asheville, again, if you're in the Asheville area, or you can come to the Asheville area. Literally on Monday, I'm meeting with the people just to get the space again. So we should be having classes in Asheville in November. And the valuable thing about this is you actually come in, especially when I start doing your own computer. So originally with Silicon Dojo, I have a lot of these. I have 15 of these. And it was a good idea for what it was, right? The idea is that we have lab computers, and so we still have lab computers. If you don't have a computer, you can use a lab computer. But anyways, the idea is you come in, they have Ubuntu, and they have VS Code, and they have everything you need installed, and then you can just sit down and learn. One of the lessons that I learned about with doing that, though, is if that's how I teach you, then you don't have a lab computer to go home with. Right, because that's the thing, like with Python should work, unless you got Windows, right? Anyways, so one of the things I realized is if I have you folks come in, we make sure that your computer is running properly, then you can take these lessons and go home, and you can actually do them on your own computer without having to necessarily get a lab computer. So that's one of the things we're doing a lot with in-person too. So you can come in with your Windows, your Mac, please no Chromebooks though, Linux, whatever else. I can do it, and I can help troubleshoot. So you do that, and then also be around other people. That's one of the things I'm really noticing in the whole virtual world. One of the things, again, I'm a Buddhist, and there's this whole idea of moderation. Take everything in moderation, including moderation. Anyways, one of the big things I've seen is in the post-COVID world, with everything being online. Right, again, in 2009, I created online content because everything was physical. And so having on-demand online content made a lot of sense. The issue is with now everything going online, people are losing the connections to other people. Again, how you're going to get a job, I really want you to understand, if you're putting out resumes blindly, it's going to suck. It's not a great way of doing things. What you want is you want to be talking to somebody who goes, wow, we need one of you. This is what I need you to put on the resume. And you hand in the resume that is done exactly how you told them to, and you get hired, right? But you only get that in the in-person world, when you're talking, when you're having conversations, when you're building trust, that type of thing. And so that's why the in-person is so important. So again, we're going to be doing it in Nashville, and then like I say, Raleigh. Raleigh is coming up, and the idea here, again, is they just have a great tech scene. Again, you know how snarky. If you follow me for a length of time, you know how snarky I am. You know how snarky I am. They're just a beautiful tech scene. Oh my God, it brings like a tear to my eyes. Like, oh, what if I had been brought up as a little geek in this tech scene? Maybe I would still be hopeful too. Yeah. Anyways, great tech scene. Again, lots of companies, lots of stuff like that. So my idea here is, again, if we can do classes, we can do classes on OpenAI, we can do classes on Llama, we can do classes on vector databases. So maybe the higher level stuff, I hate to say higher level, mid-level stuff. Anyways, the mid-level cool stuff, again, if I can get Asheville people and Raleigh people in the same room, I don't know, maybe magic will happen. Or it'll be a disaster. We'll find out next year. So anyways, you're going to become a member of that, and you're in there. That's it. And why you do not announce the last 2 online class in LinkedIn and YouTube for more people to join? Did I not announce the last 2 classes? I don't know. Because I didn't. Well, you see, let me explain to you the technical reason why I didn't do that thing. I didn't do it. I'm sorry. Do you think I'm perfect? Hell no. I mean to. I should have. That's where it's good for if you become a member of the meetup. Then you know those classes are there. I do get a little weird with YouTube. Not so much as LinkedIn. I didn't post to LinkedIn because I don't know. Didn't do it. Probably should have done it. I get a little weird with posting to YouTube because I get YouTube people. YouTube people are just YouTube people. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they are who they are. The world needs all kinds of different people. I don't necessarily want to hang around those people very much. So I get a little wonky with the whole YouTube world. Again, I swear to you, if I really felt like I could just delete my YouTube channel, I would. There have been days, there were a couple of days, my finger hovered over delete entire damn channel. But then I was too rational, and it does earn me money, so I was like, I'm not going to do it anymore. So, I don't know. So follow me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I'm much better with the social media stuff, better. But yes, I should post it. I just didn't do it. Let's see here. Anything else? Okay, now that's good. No questions? We all done? Cool. See y'all next week then.